Our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Amen. I want to talk to you this morning about two courageous women. Where in the world did she get that, you might wonder? In a perfunctory reading of the book of Esther, we may think it is just about one queen. But in truth, it is a story of two queens. They are both beautiful. They are both courageous. They are both intelligent. One is deposed. The other is lifted up. Now, they are radically different women, but they are truly radical women for the 5th century before Christ. They have a lot to tell us about feminism today. So I want to explore the lives of these two queens in our first reading today, Vashti and Esther. Well, let's start at the beginning, because the text from Esther that we have is near the end of the book. And I would ask that you all go home today and read the book of Esther, because it is a wonderful, wonderful tale. It reads like a soap opera. It's just wonderful. So, about 3 years into his reign, King Ahasuerus, actually he also went by Xerxes, so that's what I'm going to use because it's easier to say. King Xerxes commands all of Persia. He decides to celebrate how good he is by throwing this amazing series of festivals. It goes on for 6 months so that no one will doubt the fact that he is most rich and powerful king on earth. As if that isn't enough, he goes ahead and has a special feast for all of the officers in his province that lasts 6 entire days. 6 entire days of unlimited food and unlimited wine. Unlimited food and unlimited wine. Lots of wine. The king and his provincial officers are now, after 6 days, as you can imagine, entirely thoroughly drunk. And so they get into an argument as to whose women are the prettiest. Well, the king, being the king, has to show them that he has the most beautiful wife. And so he sends for her to come and appear before all of the men. Her name is Vashti. If you go back to the ancient Babylonian text, scholars believe that her name meant beautiful. So she was clearly a beautiful woman. She was Babylonian. She was highborn. She was trained all of her life as a granddaughter of kings to be a queen. So she was brought up with a sense of self and a sense of dignity. So when Xerxes orders her to appear before all of these drunken men wearing her golden crown, and we have reason to believe that it was only her crown she was supposed to wear, Vashti is appalled by this command. It means that she must leave the banquet that she is hosting at the same time for all the royal women in the harem. She must strip naked and go before this gang of drunks to entertain them. It means she will probably be used, ridiculed, and possibly raped. Vashti knows that this is going to make the king angry if she refuses to appear, but what choice does she have? She has no good choices here. So she picks what she believes the lesser of two evils. She is a queen, after all, and wants to keep her own dignity. So she refuses to appear. Now it is the king who is humiliated. Not only that, he is livid. So what is he going to do to save face? Well, his advisors say, she's not worthy to be a queen. She dared to speak against you. And this will be the worst thing ever, because all the women in Persia are now going to take her example and are going to disobey their husbands. Well, Queen Vashti did it. It's a great excuse. So, they must show everyone in the kingdom what will happen if women refuse to obey their husbands. So Vashti is deposed and banished from the harem. This is one of the worst things that can happen to you as a royal in that time period. You would have stayed in the castle, but you would have been given your own little room. None of the women who have likely become your friends would talk to you. You would be shunned. You would, of course, not go before the king again, and therefore never bear any children. You became a nobody. You became invisible. God forbid that a woman should speak her mind. So Vashti is deposed, and we hear no more of her. Enter Esther, who is a very improbable queen. She was born poor, Jewish, and an orphan. She became an orphan and was raised by her cousin Mordecai. She comes to the throne after the king hosts what is basically a national beauty contest to find a new queen. Esther wins, not only because she was beautiful and charming, but I think possibly, very probably, she was the antithesis of Vashti. She is quiet, she is charming, she listens, and she does what is commanded of her. She is also patient and calculating. Now, she doesn't tell the king that she is Jewish at this point, but instead she does everything in her power to please him. Now, some scholars feel that because of this, Esther is self-serving and anti-feminist, but this is not so. Because if you read farther along in Esther, you will see that she risks death to save the Jewish people from genocide. So here's what happened. The king, who strikes me as kind of volatile, kind of like a loose cannon here, is tricked by his chief officer, Haman, into signing a death warrant for all Jews in Persia. When Esther's cousin Mordecai learns of this plot, he implores to Esther to try and stop it. But there's a catch. If anyone goes to the king without being asked, and the king is displeased, the penalty is death. And Esther says, if I perish, I perish. So she creates a brilliant and calculated plan. She calls for a 3-day national fast among all Jews in Persia so that everyone may be prepared spiritually for what is going to happen. Then she dresses in her finest, not stripped naked, but in her finest beautiful gowns and jewelry, and she approaches the king, knowing she could be killed for this boldness. But the king, who obviously loves her very much, welcomes her. He holds out his golden scepter, and he says, "What is it, Esther? You may approach." She comes to him with a very surprising request. I'm going to give a big banquet, and I want you and Haman, your chief officer, to come. Well, the king is pleased. Wonderful. Haman is also pleased. In fact, he is so puffed up with his own self-righteousness that he struts home and brags to his wife and friends, I get to go to a special dinner. Only the king and myself with the queen. That makes me really important. And his wife, that's awesome. Yay, good for you. He says, my life would be perfect if it wasn't for that stupid Mordecai. I can't stand that guy. So his wife says, well, if you're so powerful, build a gallows and hang him. And he says, great idea. So he went and starts building this very tall gallows on which to kill Mordecai. During this time, the king can't sleep. So he thinks, maybe I will have my officers come and read me a boring list of accounts. That'll put me to sleep, as business usually does. And so while he is reading these accounts, he hears an account of the fact that Mordecai, Esther's cousin, has saved him from an assassination attempt. So he says, let's honor Mordecai. He calls in Haman, and he says, Haman, old buddy, old pal, what should I do to someone I wish to honor greatly? And Haman thinks it's him. Surely the king is going to honor him. He says, well, I would have a big parade on your horse, wearing your robes. And so the king says, great, go get Haman. Go get Mordecai. Of course, Haman is humiliated. Mordecai is honored. But Esther has been preparing her banquet, and she waits until about halfway through the meal, when the king is merry with wine. And he says, Esther, what is your request? You were going to ask me something at this banquet. And she says, okay. Guess who is a human exterminator? This man over here, this wicked Haman. He has ordered me and all the Jews to be sold. And I'm your wife, and I am queen. Do you want to give this man power to kill me? Well, the king, as you can imagine, gets very, very, very angry. And he looks out the window, and he sees the gallows. Hang Haman on that. So Haman is hanged on his very own gallows. At the same time, the king issues an edict that allows Jews to fight back against the coming genocide. And they do, and they are victorious. And to this day, the Jewish people celebrate the Feast of Purim in Esther's honor. Now, this story of these two queens, Esther and Vashti, is full of intrigue and plot twists and ordinary women who do extraordinary things. You see, Vashti could have remained queen if she had done what the king said, if she had not stood up to a crowd of drunken men. Esther could have ignored the whole issue with Haman entirely and not said a thing and allowed the Jewish people to be exterminated with probably no loss of her queenly fortunes. But instead, Vashti and Esther recognized when it was time to take a stand against evil, a stand for human dignity. They were supremely courageous, and they were both victorious in their own ways. I can think of other women who remind me of Esther and Vashti. Saint Clare of Assisi, who refused to be forced into an arranged marriage. She sought protection from Saint Francis and founded the Order of the Poor Clares. And Harriet Tubman, who led scores of women out of slavery. Suffragettes, who were imprisoned and tortured for merely wanting the right to vote. Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat and sit in the segregated area of a bus. Florence Lee Tim Oy, the first woman ordained in the Anglican Communion in 1944. And let's not forget all of the women of the Me Too movement. Women like Andrea Constand, who recently put Bill Cosby behind bars. All ordinary women who pushed back against tradition and authority to change the way that we view everything: politics, religion, and social justice. All ordinary women who risked everything they had for a cause. What will you do? You can act, or you can act disinterested. Choose wisely.